What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update for Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, following the release of its patch 1.1 update, and given how I both enjoyed Tainted Grail quite a bit when it launched earlier this year, on top of the fact that patch 1.1 does a great deal towards addressing a lot of the concerns both around the launch and the types of features people were very much requesting, like New Game Plus and Transmog, alongside quite a few additions and improvements to Act 3 in particular, both adding a few quests, some dungeons, things like that. So suffice to say, it's a very large patch. For the most part, I think it's great. I did, unfortunately, personally get caught by some of the nerfs they implemented in this patch. There were only a couple of them, but one of them was like a direct hit to one of my main builds, which was a little bit unfortunate, but, discounting that, it is, by and large, very, very positive. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Probably the easiest thing to mention straight away is the New Game Plus feature. Now, when you beat the game, you have the option to continue into New Game Plus. This is going to be useful for doing things like making different choices, and of course seeing the game's different endings, like the secret ending, or the true ending if you prefer, perhaps. But this does actually add some gameplay features in here as well. So for starters, enemies and things will get stronger as you complete New Game Plus cycles. What's more, you actually take a bit of a debuff as well. You'll get hit by a hit to your armor in particular, but that's going to be offset by the fact that the things you find in those New Game Plus cycles are going to be better as you go. In fact, most of the tooltips and stuff for them will have a little New Game Plus sign on them, so you know exactly what cycle they happen to come from. So it looks like they put some effort into actually making New Game Plus worthwhile, which I would say goes double for the fact that they've actually reworked a few dungeons and then added that content to Act 3 as an example. So if you're looking for an excuse to start over after playing the game through once, that seems to be a pretty good reason for doing so. Next up is the Transmog system. This is available just at any old crafting station, basically. You'll have a Transmog option there now, and you can, of course, swap out the appearance of what you've got for anything that you've encountered previously. Pretty standard system, but, just so you know it, but is obviously available now. I love that personally because this game has a lot of really, really cool looking armor, and I'm glad they added all of that. Talking about Act 3 in particular, though, what they've changed here seems to be mostly adding a ton of loot to it, a few dungeons, and a couple of quests to go along with that. In particular, I believe it's like Sven or Sven's tribe, alongside the Ulfir tribe, tribes of Dalriada that you could meet there, now have some extra quests if you go around talking to the villagers that are present, and they will send you, of course, to a couple new locations, adding some much needed content for what was a pretty thin zone, and that in combination with the loot should hopefully make that feel a little bit better. Speaking of things feeling a little bit better, they also mentioned making some improvements to the game's third-person mode, and after checking that out for myself, happy to say that it is a lot better, actually. It's still a little, janky in comparison to what you might expect from a full AAA production, but if you've watched, I believe, even my review for this where I showed it off a little bit, patch 1.1 makes third person significantly better. I could definitely see somebody actually playing through that in full now. And what's more, you may want to, because our questing beast, Quirko, the little pet you can find in Act 1, now actually gets a whole host of different appearance options. Basically, by feeding the little guy a couple of different items, you can change his form, and one of those forms is even, something like a mount as an example. And it looks like a lot of these other forms actually have a function on top of all of that, which I thought was kind of neat. Now, everything else is, I would say, important, but a little harder to pin down. So there's a bunch of stuff like new weapons and armors, which are obviously going to potentially add even more build diversity. They've added the Origin Potion, which is the potion that lets you respec, basically, to the end of the Alchemy quest line. So you could find these previously, but if you finish the Alchemist Guild, you'll now actually be able to get a recipe that lets you craft those potions. Now, a big change to gameplay and balance that unfortunately affected me pretty hard is that they, for the most part, removed gaining crit chance from items. Now, the reason this hit me in particular is that one of my big melee builds focused a lot on exactly that, capitalizing on crit chance, and the reason that they removed it was that apparently it was extremely easy to get it to 100%, which I can kind of attest to by the fact that I was using a build for it, and this broke New Game Plus specifically, so they changed it to accommodate that. On top of that, they've also done things like added a bunch of enemies to these new locations, which you can fight with some rebalanced sets for various armor bonuses and things like that across the game. Now, I would say that's most of like the really big highlights, which is not insubstantial. However, there are also a whole host of other fixes. In particular, they've adjusted some quests, basically just made some of them flow a little better as an example, but they've also made minor fixes to some of them, such as updated quest markers, things like that, just to make them a little more comprehensible for most people, I would say. But while going through those new quests, you may well encounter a lot of, I would say, improved interactions with the world, starting with the fact that enemies and NPCs have been given improved behaviors with the goal of making them feel a bit more alive. And alongside that, honestly too many to mention, but a bunch of dungeons have been sort of reworked and rearranged to be made to flow a little better. They've also made some tweaks to some terrain here and there, presumably to help people not get stuck as much. They added a whole bunch of like crafting stations across the Forlorn Swords to make them a bit more readily available, which probably goes hand in hand with all that new loot that I mentioned they added there, which is apparently going to include new sets of armor for the remaining tribes there. You'll be able to get their armors apparently. They've also improved art, UI, introduced a host of technical and bug fixes, as you could imagine. So all in all, patch 1.1 is honestly gigantic, and it improves most aspects of the game. Now, I will say, I had an issue with the game crashing due to some weird thing with cloud saves. It kept trying to say my regular saves and cloud saves are out of sync, even though that they were exactly the same, and every time I would tell it to just pick one, it would crash the game, and what I wound up having to do is go turn off the cloud saves altogether over on Steam to get it to get past that, so a few crashes to desktop there. And as with basically any patch, do remember to update your mods and things like that. There are mods already available for Tainted Grail if you were unaware, and if you haven't updated those, you're almost certainly going to run into a whole host of problems. So keep in mind stuff like that is almost certainly still going to happen to some degree, but on top of that, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw further balance changes and things based on what they wind up doing in New Game Plus, because I just feel like some of that stuff's going to get broken really quickly, especially if it ramps up indefinitely, things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were more fixes on the way just to catch fringe cases of various builds and things like that. People might go a little crazy with, but we'll see what happens. But to start wrapping this up, to put it simply, huge patch, ton of fixes, a lot of great changes in here. I think a lot of this actually addresses a fair bit of criticism the game received when it initially launched, some of which was from myself on top of that, and I'm really happy to see this game continuing to improve. I do think it is one of the better games that has released this year thus far, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next, especially Questline, the developer. But that's pretty much all I've got for you guys today. Certainly hope you enjoyed it, but certainly let me know how you feel about it down in the comments section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.